Every once in a while, you'll run across a subreddit uh, that seems to expose a lot about the way people think, especially people who spend their time online, and maybe some deeper psychological truths about why these people are the way they are and say the things that they do. And I say that with caution only because I don't want to come off as sounding like I'm grouping all these people into a category of anything really. I don't want to generalize at all, but I'm just using that for the intents and purposes of highlighting a specific type of individual that is commonly found in these spaces. And the reason they're commonly found in these spaces is because they're really challenged within these spaces. And Gifted, Reddit/Gifted is one of those places where looking at all of the posts and all the comments essentially in parallel with each other. They're all on the same page, but from an outside perspective, looking into a discussion like the ones that are had here is bewildering. And I won't explain why. I'll show you guys why. I haven't looked at anything today. This is the first time I've been on it, but I just had this idea. This sub has been just popping up in my recommended. So maybe Reddit is trying to tell me something that I should maybe look into a little bit deeper or go get checked out. But hey, man, I already knew that. There'll be a lot. I don't want to have to read through every single one of them, but I'll just find one that I think, like I said, highlights some of the patterns that I've been seeing in this subreddit especially. And before I even read, I'll just point out those things include essentially an obsession with one's own intellect to the point where they are making it into an identity. And that's, I guess, I can understand that to a degree, but it is an obsession with IQ as a religion, strangely enough, and kind of like a collective, I dare say, victimization because of, oh, I am so smart, I am so unique, and I am so different than the rest of the world, and who could possibly understand me? I have my own theory about what actually is going on in terms of a acute psychological phenomenon, but I'm gonna at least wait a little bit before I reveal what that is, or see if there's anything in what we look at that will essentially reveal that for me. But I think I might be onto something. I might be judging a little bit much, but let's read some of these and then figure it out, huh? So, like right off the bat, the theme of, okay, I've always been special. I've always been very academically advanced. I've always wondered why I've never skipped a grade despite being very advanced. But last night I realized that while I was academically very advanced, being super socially delayed was likely taken into account in the consideration based on the title. This person is they already have established their self perception of being incredibly smart, academically advanced, and they are questioning why they didn't skip a grade. The rationalization based on that title is because, okay, well, social skills. Okay, it's actually pretty funny because this touches right away on. I'm not going to reveal it yet, but all of the elements of what my theory consists of can be deduced from just this post. And it's a pattern, essentially, of what's actually occurring based on what these people are projecting out. Okay, so this person is just questioning, are you socially delayed because of having few peers? Or did you just have few peers to practice social skills with? And this is what these people jump into is it's a hyper analysis of social interaction in relation to intelligence, and no one thinks about it this way. It's a hyper rational way of thinking, and not in a necessarily good way. Okay, so this is not a great post. It's just basically a bunch of people saying and agreeing and sharing their experiences of, yeah, I didn't skip a grade also because I was not considered socially advanced. Okay, here will be a good one. Here's a person who is observing a phenomenon, conversations, not an inner monologue, a discussion about a topic. So this person is either saying that they talk out loud to themselves in terms of like having a conversation with themselves. I don't know. They're not clarifying if this is something they do in their head or something they actually like have that conversation out loud. But if they actually are having a conversation out loud between two people, I can see, some cases when that might be useful or acceptable. But in any other like case, or if it happens frequently to the point where these two sides of the conversation are actually like embodying someone with a voice, then that probably is bordering closer to like a split personality, and that might be a jump. But I would contend not everyone has an inner monologue, but most people, when they are thinking about something, analyzing something, in many avenues of life where you're trying to understand or use your brain, there is a self conversation like experience is happening in all of those circumstances, and that can be interpreted in a number of ways, and it can maybe be interpreted sometimes as you talking to yourself like out loud, sometimes just thoughts that are extrapolated into like sentences, perhaps coherent arguments that can be attributed to one voice in your head versus another. These things all make sense, and I can see all these things happening to most people. But there's not really enough information to, and I don't want to dive too deep into this post. The point being, this person either is experiencing a fairly normal phenomenon and misinterpreting it as a result of a number of potential reasons as a unique thing that they experience as a result of their, intellectual superiority, given the fact they're posted in the gifted sub. Or there's maybe like something actually going on in terms of like a personality dysfunction, and I'm not a psychiatrist, so I would not be able to talk about this. But depending on what he's actually like saying and means here, neither of them paint a fantastic picture. And this also lends itself to the overall theme that I have suggested a few times. And if you haven't picked up already, mental health is a pretty firm component in that. So here's a comment. This is another theme you'll see is a competition for who either has had the most struggle as a result of their like intellectual superiority, advancement, whatever you want to call it, or who has had the worst experiences. Welcome to the club. No matter how much you talk to yourself, I probably talk more. So right off the bat, no, me every day, especially when I'm on the walk, I tend to discuss so many things, blah blah blah, without any inner monologue. So I don't know how these people are drawing the distinction between an inner monologue can mean so many things. And an inner monologue can be essentially an outer monologue that is unspoken. And speaking it just makes it an outer monologue. And it's not some deep, fantastical, magical, super ability that you have that's allowing you to communicate yourself in this way. It's just you observing it on the premise of thinking you're special. Yes, it's basically two of me arguing back and forth with details, ideas, pros, cons. I'm not very nice to myself. Dude, this is, or girl, whatever, this is what everyone does. Feedback loops, conversations, debates. Yes, yes, you aren't onto something new. You're observing something very normal, but you're viewing it through the lens of being super special, and it distorts everything. And that is essentially the theme that I've been trying to get at. And this lens of being super special, it's probably closer to not necessarily like a gift. Here's one about intelligence. So, oh man, gosh, there are assumptions baked into the title itself. The most clear one being that there's a clear distinction between gifted and average people. And some folks on the sub will admit that it would be more of a spectrum, which it necessarily would be. But there is definitely a common sentiment that there's like a binary grouping between the gifted and the non-gifted, and I think that drives a lot of the assumptions that are made. I mean, this person's somewhat correct. We don't even understand intelligence completely, but he still draws the distinction between gifted and normal people. I mean, fairly correct. He calls him out for the wording of the question. But then, the second top comment is just, yeah. So it's not too important. Um, and again, they're making, I think this is a pretty self-aware comment. I would say a lot of gifted people are only gifted because they have an environment conducive to learning. I think that's a truth that a lot of people here won't admit because they like to think that it's innate, inherent to them as a person, part of their natural born skill set. Here's another one. You ever find yourself thinking in someone else's voice? I mean, that could perhaps be a number of things. You hear someone, you have a vision, a symbol of them in your head, and that includes their voice and their monologue. And sometimes, if you have an idea that you think would be attributed to them, that might have been inspired by or associated with them, it can very well be that you hear that idea or is expressed in their voice. I don't think that's a crazy phenomenon. It might be, but everyone is so different and the experience is so subjective that it can be described in all of these different ways, and not that doesn't necessarily make it gifted. There's also an obsession with um, COGAT scores, which I don't even know exactly what the acronym is. I just know it's a testing standard for determining giftedness. So let's look at someone who might think they're gifted. They probably came on the sub, and they're looking for some kind of effort. I mean, I don't want to make assumptions. Let's read. Okay, so he says, since I can remember, people have asked him if he's gifted. He doesn't think he's special. He has mental discomfort. He's never felt mentally well. Okay, so yes, he did start looking online for symptoms of gifted people. So he started looking not for what his symptoms might lead to, but what the symptoms of gifted people were, and he feel quite identified. Well, okay, so you have he admits to selection bias, um, right here, and that's fine. He's been interested in the strangest topics, tends to be obsessive about things I like. Oh, okay, that is very rare. Virtue, and they describe them as virtues often. Virtue gifted people have is the ability to put a mask in front of people to show themselves in a different way than they are. So, like social adaptation, he's describing social adaptation in a way that makes him, sound special, that allows him to identify with this group of gifted people. And then the friendship and romantic relationships being disastrous is another common element, and that is another suspicion I have, that what this effort is by these people who are posting, is almost an attempt to not only rationalize but also scapegoat some of the negative experiences that they have or can't explain in life. And that is a reason there's a high autistic demographic within the sub. Self admitted. You can go on, and a lot of these people will admit they're autistic. I think a lot of them are autistic, and they understand that as being gifted. And I think there is a lot of overlap if you want to even acknowledge gifted as being something that exists. But I think what you see, and what I kind of alluded to earlier, is that there is a phenomenon of that spectrum being mistaken for giftedness. And I understand that. I understand why. It's because it's always a little bit nicer to be able to perceive yourself in a positive light or in a light that identifies you with superiority. But that creates and lets fester all kinds of poor assumptions. And what we've seen so far is pretty tame. Here we go. I mean, this is a pretty. This would be something you would expect to see on here. How many people have you met that can intellectually keep up with you? So I don't think I can vote because I'm not logged in. But I mean, just think about what the question itself implies is that there's not a lot of people that can keep up with you if you're gifted. And lending itself to the point I just made, how much of the keeping up with is actually the other person's inability to like intellectually keep up with them at their pace and discuss ideas rigorously and in depth, or how much of that is just a social incohesiveness that they perceive as the other person not being able to keep up with them. But it's really just they're not like properly engaging with that other person socially, and they think they're expressing an idea in one way, perhaps very elegantly, but they really aren't. And so the person on the other side is rightfully confused. And the gifted person takes that as, oh, yeah, I mean, you don't know what I'm talking about. You can't keep up with me. This person is what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, this person is a simpleton, clearly. And that's once they reach that point in the rationalization process, they don't need to go any further because they found the answer and it applies to every potential dissonance elsewhere in their life. And it enables them to not have to take steps to improve those things or acknowledge and address those things, even if you have the ability to improve something that might be difficult to improve and you're aware you need to improve it, I can definitely understand why it would be more comfortable to just dismiss that as, hey, I'm gifted. There's going to be things, there's going to be negatives that come as a result. I can't control that. It is how it is. Um, and so, like I said, that disallows that person from the agency of identifying, improving what needs to be improved. And that can apply to so many things. But social awareness and social skills are a common thread on here and a common scapegoat, if we want to use that word. 'Cause you can even in like the first thing you see is the credentialism. I scored this. I scored this, just to prove they're gifted. There very rarely are ideas for such a gifted subreddit. You would think that more substantive ideas are discussed, but really this is just a massive projected identity crisis. And all these people are either affirming each other or confusing, belittling, and competing with each other for superiority. Mensa, I know, is a. Actually, I don't know anything about Mensa. Autistic. Oh, more test scores. Oh, time to brag. You're only as unique and gifted as your greatest accomplishment. So let's hear it. Oh, I see. Clever little description for his, question asking people to brag. This is innocent enough. Oh man. And this person comes out the gate swinging. Valid question in the title. Wrong definition of gifted. He actually doesn't proceed to correct him. His answer 10 at a world top 10 art uni as a migrant from a local. Oh, so he graduated college, top 10 art uni. Art uni? Like you went to the one of the top 10 art unis? I mean, that's impressive just going to, I guess, being able to afford college. But I don't think that's not a gifted accomplishment. I graduated from the number 2 real estate school in the country. And that doesn't mean shit. I like that response. Down to earth. I have a wife, kids. Oh, here's another. Your premise is flawed. Term gifted is given to one after a psychological. Oh, IQ, IQ. No, no, it has I. The dude, man, he wasn't actually trying to propose a completely different definition of IQ. It's clear what he's trying to do. He's trying to ask a question. That's what I mean when I say the camaraderie question mark comes into play. That's when you see this almost competition like belittling come. It's not belittling. That's when you see this almost aggressive, accusatory behavior come into play, is because these people, the gifted label is their identity. So if anyone does anything remotely close to questioning it, or even makes a joke, because it says not, I mean, this is, he said nothing, then he'll have to, obviously correct that person. And again, oh, IQ, IQ. It's all about IQ. And it might be. IQ is essentially abstraction. And the thing about abstraction is you can improve if you want to, not tremendously, but you certainly can if you take the same test over and over, because you become very familiar with the type of question and the mode of thinking that you have to get good at in order to do well on those tests. And that's what a lot of these people will die on the hill of too, is that it doesn't matter what you get on your first test score. You can take it as many times as you want, and your highest test, that's what matters. And there's another idea along the lines of gifted people can score incredibly low, and it doesn't mean they're not gifted. But non-gifted people will never score incredibly high, and if they do, they're automatically gifted. So it's a solely IQ based threshold. Here's another one. I don't like the way you phrase your statement. No one's accomplishments are things that are actually that unique, and even if they were, they're not the only thing about a person that makes someone unique. What are you opposing in his statement? I mean, he's asking for your unique accomplishments. And obviously, there are people out there who have unique accomplishments. That's what innovation is. But what kind of completely unaware statement is this? What kind of lack of court awareness would possess you to feel the need to point this out, man? No one made the claim that you're responding to, and no one attacked your special identity. And this person is right in his response. Yeah, the gifted has connotations of being, you know, gifted. IQ. Oh, but IQ, but IQ. Oh, shoot. I was tempted to. I mean, I think this person's pretty innocent, asking a pretty general question, uh, offering some pretty, consistent and sensible responses. Oh my gosh. Um, I might have misinterpreted this thread entirely. This is like, it's a dog pile almost. You're arguing with a child. The ad homs are coming out. They saying he doesn't understand. They don't understand the psychological concept of giftedness. Look at this hyper rationalization of a illusion, something that you created in your head. This person thinks they're playing a game. This is it again. See, I was feeling a little bit bad because scrolling through some of these, I was like, hey, maybe these people aren't that bad. But no, there is a pervasiveness of a certain kind of people that, like I said and will repeat, intimately identify with this label of giftedness. And what will result is a very ugly superiority complex that results in things like this and ad homs where there don't need to be. I don't know, it gives me, I don't like it. You know, I get the argument. Hey, let these people do their thing. They're online posting whatever. It's a free country. They didn't bother you. but I don't know. It's online. I've been on Reddit for a while. I've seen a lot of things, and my takeaway conclusion from the site in general is that it is filled with projection and lends itself to a very specific type of person who is psychologically rewarded from digital affirmation and or the ability to, not by merit but by sheer brute force, project a collective opinion onto everyone. What I mean by that essentially is, in any given subreddit, except for a few, maybe, there's a very clear, overwhelming way of thinking. In the real world, that's not necessarily how it works. Sometimes in institutions, that's how it works. But in the real world, not everyone thinks the same, and you're not going to get the same consensus on any given topic or idea. So the problem that I'm getting at is that, and this is past just a sub, the gifted sub, spending too much time on a website like this actually skews and distorts your perception of reality and the world and what the average person thinks. Because if you spend most of your time reading threads as opposed to discussing ideas with people, flesh and blood people in real life social circles and groups, you're going to start to think that that is a representation of what's out there in reality. And it's not. And that can have pretty bad consequences. But what ends up happening right here is a massive echo chamber. And this is just one tiny little island. Some of these I'm not even going to try to understand. What is this? Oh, it just got political. I wasn't going to make it political. So, banning gifted and talented programs. Currently, right wing commentators are expressing significant concern because of de Blasio wants to eliminate gifted and talented programs. The alleged reason is that very few minorities, except Asian and Jewish individuals who are notably overrepresented, are selected for these programs. Consequently, it's perceived as classist racist, particularly considering the disproportionate representation of wealthier subgroups. The book, Bell Curve, which appears to be controversial, has illustrated that certain ethnic groups have virtually no individuals scoring beyond 145 or 160 on IQ tests, resulting in very few highly or profoundly gifted people, scarce PhD in hard sciences. The situation suggests that in America, right-wingers advocate for the utilization of IQ, while left-wingers tend to reject its significance, almost denying its relevance. Quite intriguing, isn't it? Thoughts? Oh, okay. So he's saying that right-wing commentators are upset because de Blasio eliminated talented programs, gifted programs, which prioritized people based on merit. And the implication, the unspoken, what I didn't understand because it wasn't said, it was supposed to be assumed, is that that is bad. Meritocracy is not ideal. The representation needs to be proportionate, and if not, it's not effective or efficient, and we should get rid of it. So, without saying, he's implying they should be eliminated, and he agrees with de Blasio. So the situation suggests that in America, right wingers advocate for the utilization of IQ, while left wingers tend to reject its significance, almost denying its relevance. Quite intriguing, isn't it? So maybe he's not making a point, maybe he's just pointing it out. The comments are going to be what's revealing, because what you might expect from a community like this is the acknowledgement that at the end of the day, when you are observing a threshold that we would consider gifted or looking at gifted people, the only thing that matters is raw merit, because you're observing a, like I said, a threshold, and it only stain and skew the factual data that we can draw from those observations. If we were throwing conditions onto the standards for determining, giftedness. Let's see though. Politics and psychology, done to appease their own egos without any consideration for why those programs exist. which is to group gifted kids together as to promote friendship and social development. The academics I could care less about. What? Okay, so what I would say is a very, very strong deviation from the common sentiment that the academics I could care less about. You must be oblivious to the pervasive self-flatulation of IQ and these COGAT scores and these mental programs that dominate the subreddit. And as soon as the political side is introduced, you rationalize that away to appeal or adhere to your predetermined side, which is that yes, actually, the reason those groups exist has nothing to do with academics. It's for friendship and social cohesion. You half of you reject social cohesion and efforts to improve social awareness uh, in the name of your giftedness. And now you're saying it's the point of these. See, that's just not true. And this person is jumping through hoops now, and they happen to have the top comment. And there's a false assumption made that if you tell a kid that they'll eventually hit a brick wall and not be able to coast on their brains forever, then that lets a kid know why they're struggling all of a sudden while their peers are doing fine. No, yeah, again, that's the assumption everyone will agree with, but is wrong because it will end up being the reason they continue to struggle. You don't need to know the reason why you're not doing well necessarily. It might help you to understand if there are conditions limiting your ability to learn and improve, but that's not a reason to stay in front of that brick wall or to assume the brick wall is closer than it actually is. And that's what actually happens in the long term is a psychological self trap, a self barricade. The thing is, you couldn't go on the subreddit and make people aware of this because I mentioned this, I said this, the conversation is dominated and your comment will get removed and you'll get banned from the sub. And that's not speculation, that's fact based in experience. Okay, we are, we got down a couple rabbit holes there. Let's see if there's like one more. Observing a child. Uh, okay, I have a child who is showing various signs of being gifted, extremely young, doing things way behind her peers. By the way, if you don't know this, or if you're a parent, or if you're becoming a parent, or you've been given insight from a parent, every parent has this fault of thinking that there is going to be something special about their kid, and some take it a lot farther than others. But it's a very natural phenomenon because as the parent, you see everything that kid does, and you don't see everything that your kid's peers do. You couldn't, maybe your kid is insane. Maybe they win the spelling bee every year, and they graduate valedictorian, and 4.0 perfect grades, all this stuff, all these extracurriculars. Then hey, maybe got something going. But what are you saying? She doesn't really give any information as to what the gifted traits are, and she's asking for help. And she admits here, when she talks about it to people in real life, she gets met with not an ideal response. And this sub, as a parent of her children, is where she feels safe. That, like, if you admit something like that as an adult with kids, that should be concerning. And that should draw red flags into the rest of what you are saying. And then she admits to her own mental health problems, assortment of mental health problems. She mentions she doesn't want to brag. She's careful with who she shares her child's achievements with. You posted it on Reddit, lady. And you're still met with malice. Also, her father and myself are both considered former gifted students. Oh, so you used to be gifted, but you were burnt out by high school. Both you and the father? So maybe there is also, again, the conclusion being drawn from an assumption that's it's predetermined, it's already there. So they see anything and they attribute it to giftedness because it's makes the most sense for them. At least you admit it's vague. uh, but the post itself is revealing. I feel like the comments are much more level-headed. Just treating just treating a kid like normal. Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. And that's what I think is the negative result from a lot of this is like you identify, you get introduced to this idea of giftedness, even if you're the person that's gifted, or especially if you're the person that's gifted, you'll identify with it, and it will dictate why not you are able to do the things in your life, and that's dangerous, and it's prohibitive, in my opinion. Gosh, I don't know how long we've been doing this. I feel like we have to stop. Uh, but this is another subreddit that sucks. There's some good people in here, I think, that are trying to help. There's some really delusional people in here, and I think what it reveals at the end of the day, that this obsession with labeling, there is a very big obsession with labeling in this age by all kinds of groups, and the associations, as seen here, with the mental illness side of things. I don't think that relationship is exclusive to this sub right here. I think this reflects some greater phenomenon of these types of people, and that's about it.